also stop the video now. It's more mysterious. So this is really live on YouTube?
1 minute. And now, yes, this is live on YouTube.
Can I share a link?
Yep. One second. How can I? Oh, we have a chat here. This is it, and I put it on our site. And go. And everybody, if you already hear us, we will be online in exactly 8 hours. 8 p.m.
Or 7 p.m. if you're in Central Europe.
Or 7 p.m. Yep. So yeah, we have 3 minutes. We're waiting for you. I propose for us to switch off the video, but it's nearly, yeah, it's 8 o'clock and 7 o'clock.
Perfect.
Yeah, we can go live. Yeah.
Let the games begin.
Ta-da!
Haha! And Evgeny is late.
Yep.
You know,
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Narratorica podcast, Fun with Flex. And today you have me, Maria Kachkova, game writer, nerd designer, indie developer, and
me, Evgeny Pozankov, I write weird shit.
And I am Georg Hobmeier. That's me. And I also do things live.
Oh yeah, I shouldn't say that I do weird shit with Georg in the room.
yeah, I challenge you to a weird shit contest.
No, you win. Probably instantly.
Certainly so.
So yeah, and we have Georg is one of my dearest friends. He is joining us all the way from Vienna, Austria.
That's
and
right.
Georg will now introduce himself in a way only he can. As in, tell us about yourself.
Yes, again, I'm Georg Hobmeier. I currently live in Vienna, very close to actually where Stalin used to live, if that is of any value for the Russian audience. Stalin spent some time in Vienna, as it seems. I'm originally not from Vienna. I come from a little town in the west of Austria. It's if you're rich and an oligarch and went on a skiing vacation, you might have been there. It's a place called Tyrol. I have a bit of a weird biography. because I'm not particularly trained to work in games. I'm not a programmer. I'm also not like a normal writer. I was actually trained as an actor, which is not a very good education if you want to work in games. I mean, on one hand, it is a good education, but it's also not really, really a good education if you want to work in games. So I spent a substantial amount of time, probably like a little bit more than a decade, as a freelance artist in kind of the border zone of technology, performance, theater, and media art, developing my own work, which is mainly centered about the relationship between humans and machines. I built devices that could be controlled with motion. I built devices that could control motion via electroshocks, and this is where I beat you concerning the weird shit. So
I did put electrodes on my face, just not that much, that many.
Yes. I built something that can control whatever can be controlled in the body with electroshocks. And doing that, I stumbled upon game engines in the year 2007. I was like, oh, there's game engines. That's fun. That's a little bit more exciting than, let's say, Flash games, which was a big thing back then, but Flash games didn't really seem like a very exciting environment, for me at least. 3D engines, on the other hand, were, and then the mods, together with a group of people, about the militarization of European borders, which is a bit of an unusual choice. It was not like, hey, let's make Half-Life 2 Deathmatch, but you can fly. Or similar modding efforts, but we had like a very, very strong political theme in our mod. And that somehow pretty much went through the roof. It was also a bit of a hard lesson because we had no idea whatsoever how to make a computer game. Zero, nada. I mean, we had some experience with computers, we did interactive media stuff before, but it was really like, hey, let's take that game engine and let's try something. So it took us a stupid amount of time to actually make something feasible that actually functioned in the end. But then when we published the mod, and we even got some financial support, some art grants for it, it was more successful than all our previous theater work put together. If you see me reacting weirdly, it's because I'm being attacked by a child from under the table. So just this is the monster. Isn't she cute? But now it's your time to go back into the cage. So, sorry, it's really, it kind of escapes its chains constantly. Okay, now I think I have to. It has to be part of the show. Okay, this is Nurit. She's a very gifted writer as well, but she's more of a reader than a writer. So in any case, where was I? Yes, political games. So that went pretty much through the roof, and from there on, we pretty much decided, well, let's not make art anymore. Let's only make games because you can reach so many more people with that. And for us, it was like from the very, very beginning, a journey that was always tied to political content. So we would, we weren't really interested in making so-called mainstream games or even like so-called indie games. It was pretty much oriented on a journey that kind of looked in explicit political content in connection with games. This is pretty much the dose of screen time that you should have at your age. So I'm gonna put this baby now back to the handler. Say goodbye to the internet.
Bye.
Oh. So no, she got a little bit too excited, kind of staring in the screen. And, you know how to dance. So yeah, and then in the early 2010s, we basically decided to try to become professional in that and started to do smaller kind of funded project, work for hire, and then things kind of slowly picked up. In the beginning, it was really like small projects. We were like, it's nice. You can make a little bit better money than in the arts. Work for a museum there, did something with art funding. This is a very convenient thing that you have in some European countries. and that you have grants that you can ask for. I mean, this is something that probably you can do in Canada and in Scandinavia, and then in like a handful of countries in Central Europe, but nowhere else in the world. So we were in like a bit of a unique position that we could afford that kind of life without being profitable, you know. Like on the other hand, we did somehow manage to get quote unquote customers. So it wasn't really business to business, but it was more, I would say, business to culture. So a museum, a theater, an NGO, and then we basically tried to make a living, which surprisingly enough did function. So and then things became a little bit more drastic when we started to do a project called Frontier, so the Path Out. So this was a probably like our most far-reaching project so far. It was actually kind of a small game budget-wise. It was the third game we did about migration and borders, and it was made together with a Syrian refugee who was basically, it was an autobiographical story, so to say. So he was a designer, but was part of the team, and he was also the protagonist, which is also something weird that you have like a real protagonist in a game. And that was an experiment we thought that we're just going to put out in 2017, and then it kind of exploded despite like a really modest budget and art direction. I mean, we took it as far as we could with like a ridiculous amount. I would say like, let's say 10% of what a normal indie game has as a budget we had at our disposal, but it functioned super well. And I think we kind of hit a nerve of a sort. So that was like a huge thing for us, and that basically that also made the ball rolling, and that ball, interesting enough, is still rolling. We're still kind of probing and kind of trying to see how far we can go with that project. The other thing in the recent years that was very, very defining for us, and it's something that also is something we were like really very much still pursuing, is to make mixed reality games that let you play politics. So the problem with the other stories that we're making, it's mostly narrative content. So of course you can have political story, but the act of politics is an act of, you know, like governing something, creating laws, going one way or the other. And we were really keen on making a project in that direction. So we were very lucky enough to call it holistic networking, to bump into a theater in Austria that was actually interested in producing something like that. It was a complete surprise for everyone, I think also for the theater. They have this very extravagant Polish director, and she just said, "I want something digital." And then we're like, "Okay, you want something digital? How about here we have something augmented reality, and here we have a dystopian European future. How about that? Yes, please." And then we made a project called Vienna All Tomorrows, which is a speculative project about the future of Vienna, where you play with 3 factions on a gigantic map, and you are basically fighting over the control of the city. So in the future, Vienna is a city-state. Austria left the European Union, exit, and then Vienna left Austria, Dixit. If you speak German, you find that hilarious because it's a pun on masturbation. If you don't speak German, it's just Vixit, you know, it doesn't mean anything to you. It's just fix it. People find it incredibly funny, like disturbingly funny, I have to say. People were also really happy that Vienna is leaving Austria. That was also quite disturbing. So yeah, I mean, that's in that project, you're basically taking sides on different ideological factions. You have like technophiles startup bros that want to solve everything with technologies. You have like the eco faction that want to have like an ecotopian future. And then of course, because it's Europe, you also have the right-wing authoritarians who think like only a firm land can save the fatherland. And in theory, these factions should work together to administrate, to be the city's administration, but in practice, they just struggle for control. And you play this on a huge map, like 10 by 10 meters with costumes, and you run around with tablets. So this is the AR component. And then stuff grows out of the map, and then you can take decisions. So the game design is quite straightforward. It's Sid Meier 101. So a series of meaningful choices. Yes, I raved now through the first 10 minutes.
Yes.
Please.
Please save you.
Yeah, please re-trigger my raving.
Well, first we need to mention that both Path Out and Vienna Tomorrow is Causa Creations works, right?
Yes, yes. So
the company that you have co-founded.
Yes, the company I've co-founded. I'm also working under the banner of Gold Extra, which is a bit of an older mixed media art collective. Well, Gold Extra is more of a experimental kind of a experimental stage, and Causa Creations is also experimental, but we are trying to be part of the industry somehow. Mm-hmm. And we are part of the industry, but sometimes it feels like, oh, we're part of the industry. What are we doing here? Here's a man who made, I don't know, Grand Theft Auto. What am I doing here? But this is still puzzling me that the game industry allows for that, because in theater or in music and also in literature, I think, you know, that there is much more walls. So you don't get to start and do like a weird little project and then you hang out with these people and they're all nice and they all talk to you. So I still think like I'm still like a little bit love struck with the games industry because of that reason. Mm-hmm. That there is this connection between people who make like incredibly successful AAA games, and they don't give a fuck, you know, why should they not hang out with the people who make small little weird games? And sometimes people who make like great AAA games are a few weeks later the guy that makes like the new weird game. So this is the other great thing, that people have this capacity to transform and change and try something else.
I'm enjoying a lot of shutting up and just listening to you. For
sure. Yeah, I know. So how far would you like to push this?
So let's take it to more specific way. So I really want to talk to you about Vienna tomorrow, and part of the reason why I wanted to invite you to talk about it is because specifically I have no idea whether you have ever done anything normal, and you can kind of nowhere profit would kind of be called normal.
Yeah.
But and basically you can sort of like you're a good way to introduce people to like different stuff, because we mostly like have video games and escape rooms, and then everything else is just another medium altogether. So how about we talk about Vienna All Tomorrows a little bit more, and from the perspective of narrative specifically.
Yeah.
So if you we'll try to provide a starting point, but just how was the design of Vienna All Tomorrows happened specifically?
So this actually came from a failed application. I worked together with a company that I didn't sign an NDA, but I'm still going to name them. And they made an application which was about people fleeing from a first world country to a third world country in kind of a reversed migration situation. So the first world is falling apart, and there's kind of a reversed migration happening. And this was, I think the concept was quite good, but it was rejected on political terms. The funding body said, no chance that we will give you that money, because it's obviously not in tune with the political party who is in charge of that country right now, and we cannot piss them off. So I basically had like a pretty in my opinion, pretty interesting concept that like a little bit of lore that I created for this, which was a dystopian Europe that is falling apart, and that actually has like a reverse migration. People are migrating to like a prospering East Asia, prospering African Union. And so, but I think there was like a lot of smaller kind of interesting points going on across Europe. And Vienna was kind of a strange beacon of light in a sea of chaos. So I had this scenario in my hands. On the other hand, as I mentioned, there was this small portfolio that we had with the art projects. So when I actually went into the theater, I pitched something completely different. I went into the theater and I pitched, and now we come to the Euromaidan, curiously enough. I pitched a LARP that I developed together with an Australian company about quarantine procedure. And this LARP brought us, the research for this LARP brought us in the year 2014 to Kiev in March 2014. That is the Maidan connection. So I pitched this and then they basically said no. And I was like, why? And they said like, then, there again was this magic moment. We want something digital. So basically the starting point was me panicking and just throwing two elements together that came to my mind. One was the dystopian scenario that I had worked on, the other one, augmented reality. Mm-hmm. And then basically after that kind of solidified into a little bit of a more, I would say, coherent concept, we did decide quite early in the process that we want to stay pretty simple, because we knew we will have people coming in, like who never played games in such capacity before. So we said like, okay, it's going to be simple. This is going to be very much about the information, about the scenarios, and then you will take decisions. There will be no complicated stats or jokers or extra cards, because this is not a game for like I would say like more advanced gamers. This is quite straightforward. So in that sense, it's really like, would you like to take this decision or that decision? When you could choose, and there was kind of an emergence of some strategies how you could play, but it was pretty easy. So, but now we come to the narration. I'm sorry, I'm being attacked again. Goodbye. She really wants to be part of this podcast. It's at this point we were looking at a very particular atmosphere. Mm-hmm. We wanted to, because in Vienna we have a very particular approach to humor. It's very dark. It's very, I would say, sinister, but very ironic at the same time. It's often kind of a, oh my God, it's very often kind of related to death. People have this obsession with graveyards, and it's very morbid. But it's hilarious at the same time. So we basically thought we want to come up with our own atmosphere, our own steampunk, and we call it Praterpunk, which is kind of mixing, well, obviously steampunk or biopunk or whatever. And Prater is basically kind of an old amusement park that is really worn down, mm-hmm. and also quite morbid in some of its areas. So it's really a bit the heart of Vienna, the Prater. So Praterpunk was basically the starting point. So like a very particularly Viennese way of how this future could actually function. Mm-hmm. And it would also mean that, like that everything is kind of ironic and extreme, but also light at the same time. Mm-hmm. So it was very clear that this would be also kind of a contemporary comment on political culture, that we would incorporate current politics. Well, this was quite clear. So we wouldn't come up and, yes, now it's really, really bedtime, huh? Unless you have something to say, it's bedtime. Da, you want to say something? Say goodbye. Say goodbye. Goodbye. So, isn't she cute?
Well, we had cats on the podcast. Now we have a baby on the podcast. Please, somebody bring a dog.
The baby is hard to avoid. So basically, we created our own dystopian future that was full of Viennese elements. The omnipresent neighbor of Vienna of the last 15 years, Michael Heupel, became kind of now he retired. Curiously enough, in the month of our premiere, he actually retired. But that was pretty good for publicity in a way.
Allegedly unrelated.
No, we had him kind of as you could kind of bring him back as a cyborg, and if you followed particular storyline, you could make him like the AI that controls the city. So yeah, and then the storyline itself was basically stretched out over 25 years. So in 1 hour, you went through 25 years of ruling the city. So that means you had like different ages, and in each age, particular events would occur and pop up on the map, and then you would take decisions. And according to those decisions, the city would change, the factions would gain control or lose control, and the city would also kind of, I don't know, become more safe or less safe, or more savory or more healthy or more intelligent or more rich. And that would also, of course, imply bring new events that could be triggered into the quote unquote card deck. So it was all based on like this vast pool of events that are kind of interconnected with each other. And they could be really, really, really different. Like you could have, very often it kind of was a healthy mix in the end, but you could have like ultra modern cities or kind of utopian things where everything was quiet and nice and everyone had human rights, even canary birds. Or you could have these ultra draconic right-wing states, which happened once, disturbingly enough, with not too much resistance. So that was basically like the core of the narration. And it wasn't just that people were like standing there and holding their tablets and reading all that stuff. So there were like other layers of narration. But first of all, obviously the people were in a real space. So there was a scenography, there was this 10 by 10 meter map of Vienna that you would basically walk on. There were like elements of decoration that we took from, we were inspired by the municipal office of Vienna, which means it looked a little bit, I don't know, pseudo-modern. You had like roll-up banners, but also like not really too healthy plants. And there was like this giant golden imperial eagle of Austria and Viennese flags and the cyborg mayor. So we made like a really weird office space that people were walking around in their strange costumes.
Did you build it with some specific purpose?
Basically this was supposed to be, so the role of the people was to be the council of the city. And they were supposed to be like a unity council where all the different factions are represented, where they had to work together. So basically, this was closely modeled after some of the chambers from the city hall. And we had a set designer, curiously enough, actually, a graphic artist from, you can hear the babies attacking again now. So basically we had Clement Scott from Broken Rules, who also worked on Old Man's Journey, and we asked him, hey, do you want to do scenography? Do you want to work in a theater? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And we successfully abducted him from his office, because it's more fun to make a scenography for a theater piece than to localize your game or port it. So we basically, my apologies to Broken Rules that he was a bit absent in that period because he had more fun in our office at that point. Yeah, this is, I don't know if you can hear the insane laughter of the baby talking about fun. It's about to kind of prepare yet another attack. There's a desperate mother in the background who doesn't want to appear. The baby is obviously out of control. I said that, so we had the people in their costumes, we had the scenography, we had the events and the narration on the tablets that people could basically, going around with their tablets. This is not a tablet, this is a phone. So imagine this being a really nice iPad. So they go around like, ooh, here's an event. Look here, let's take a decision. And people, yeah?
But please continue.
No, you, please. I talk too much. You say something.
So I want to clarify like some specifics. So what was the goal of the people and what were their ways of interacting with the game? Like there was a tablet. Could they talk to other people? Was there some other actors that influenced their decisions in some ways?
We decided not to have actors at all. First of all, we wanted to have like a very economic show, and we wanted to have really a game and not like a hybrid. I mean, it is a hybrid anyway, but we wanted it to not be a theater piece in a sense that we had actors in it. We did have actors in it though, because there was a huge projection. So people were in these teams, each team, teams of 3. Each team had 1 tablet. First of all, not enough budget for tablets for everyone. Secondly, we wanted people to work together and take decisions together. Then there were decisions that could be only taken by 9 people. Internally, they had not even internally, they were even in the game, they had the not so sophisticated title of mega events. And in these mega events, you took drastic decisions like, will you bring down all bridges that cross the Danube in order to get rid of the outer districts, which everyone hates on this side of the Danube? Or will you get rid of that district and make it into a giant corpse processing facility so that the city can eat other human beings in the form of healthy protein sausages? And these more drastic decisions you had to take as a group. And people really took this quite serious, this idea of debating with each other. We once had an entire family of 9 coming because they like to argue, they said.
Oh.
So it was like, and the age range was from 17 to 85.
Whoa, shit.
Yeah, no, that was quite drastic.
Well, they're a family of 9. That's all they do. So.
Exactly. I think this is they were professional. So this was really, in that sense, this was really a space where people interacted with each other. This was an element we kind of really didn't have so much focus on in the beginning, because we didn't quite. We didn't quite have it in mind that people would interact so much with each other. Our focus was rather strictly on the game elements, the decisions, and then when we did the first test, we were like, wow, people are actually, they like to take on these roles, they like to argue, they like to really go into the character, they like to think about, ooh, I'm an authoritarian now. What kind of decisions do I want to take? I'm like, oh no, I'm an authoritarian. I have to take these decisions. I don't want to be an authoritarian. So people had like all sorts of crises as well because of the identity, particularly the ones that were authoritarians, or they really enjoyed being authoritarian. So this was a part of the concept that kind of emerged, but it wasn't so much in the core design. So, and now there was another huge element that I haven't mentioned yet. We had a television station, a fictitious television station. They would bring the news when things occurred. It was mostly connected to random events from the outside and mega events, so people taking particular decisions. And this television station was called The Fünkel, Wiens Audiovisueller Medienkanal. and Wafumkel had like different newscaster, and of course we used actors from the theater. So these newscasters would kind of come in and present the news and talk about the drastic effects of global warming now finally taking place. And this was also, I would say, like one of the more, the further we were, the more we worked on this project, the more crazy it got. And I think it was also because we have one of our co-writers, she was one of the dramaturgs, but she really got engaged in the process. And she actually, she said like, okay, everything, we have to crank up everything to 12. So the events and all the text became more crazy and crazier throughout the process. So it was pretty wacky in the end. Entire atmosphere, and also the newscaster, very much also their acting style. So it was pretty much over the top, which helped the people, you know. So they didn't have this kind of weird normality, but they were like, hey, okay, this is completely out of control anyway, so I can just jump in that and wear that costume and kind of okay, now it gets crazy. Oh yeah. Sorry, crazy baby fell.
So you kind of gave them a license to behave, explore whatever they wanted with this crazy situation.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the people always stayed kind of within this framework of taking decisions. There would have been a few ways to sabotage the game, where we were like, okay, you could sabotage the game here. You could kind of the way how you also sabotage democracy, you know, like you block a vote, for example. And in theory, you could have done it as well. You could have blocked votes, or you could have kind of fucked with your own faction. But people were very much straightforward. They wanted to be those characters, and they wanted to, quote unquote, win the game. I think the more problematic games were the ones where people came back.
Oh.
And yeah. And people were like, okay, now I'm going to win the game. And suddenly you had like a asymmetric relationship in the room. Because obviously we couldn't do like balancing or okay, now you're now level 2 and you're level 1. Well, we had no idea that people would come back, so we had to kind of prevent people doing speed runs and taking like a bunch of decisions because they knew them already. So we had to put some safety in there as well.
How did you do it actually?
So the easiest way to win the game in say like the middle of the process was to just rush like decisions, which was possible, and we basically just implemented a mechanism that you could only operate at a particular pace, and then you had to actually wait for the game to kind of catch up with you again. I mean, this is also very realistic, you know. I mean, you can pass an insane amount of laws, but the bureaucracy is only so fast, so it will kind of take some time. In the main game, it was quite organic with kind of this rubber band dynamic that the game slowed you down a little bit, but not too obviously and not too harshly when you took a lot of decisions. And then you could basically find your pace. So we kind of secretly forced the game to a particular pace, because otherwise it would have been a problem in terms of balancing.
What kind of like tips and tricks after doing this narrative experiment you have for people doing something this scale for AR, for specifically live action AR in the room?
Live action AR in a room. Testing. So do as many tests as you can. Don't have too many assumptions on how the players will behave. It's much more interesting to actually see how they will adapt your concept. So player-based design makes a lot of sense in that context. Do take advantage of the fact that people want to interact with each other. If you have people in a room, don't just give them digital means to interact with each other unless it makes specifically sense to block them from other interactions. But make sure that you can, I mean, because single player games on a computer are kind of lack that component, and people enjoy playing with each other. And they enjoy taking on roles. So there's so much to learn and so much to take on board from LARPs and from board games here, and like bring this knowledge on board. This is not a digital game like a computer game that you're designing here. You're designing an immersive experience for numerous people. So check out LARPs, check out how board game design works. There's valuable lessons to be learned from those people.
Christiane Hütter had a fantastic phrase. These are not analog games, these are post-digital games.
Yes, that's sounds like a phrase from her.
yeah, it's probably the most her phrase that they possibly exist. Mash, do we have anything from the chat?
Yes, we have. It isn't related with IR games, but our viewers asks, is it a good career to be a game scenarist?
How is it working out for you, Georg?
Well, I mean, I must tell you something. Before I went into games, I was an experimental performance artist. So from that perspective, you can only go up. It didn't do anything as exciting as nailing my scrotum to the red square, to quote the work of a Russian colleague. No, I mean, for me, it's fine. I mean, it's quite exciting work. It depends, I think, where you are. I think if you're in London, it's hard because survival reasons. But if you manage to somehow be in the right place, and if you kind of make it work for yourself, and there's like I did a couple of talks actually on how to survive as this kind of designer. The talk that I gave at the DEF CON before the Gamescom 2017, it's called Mother, I'm an Art Game Designer. And I believe if you're like there's like numerous survival strategies in order to make this work. If you want to become rich and famous, I'm not so sure if it's a good trajectory. If you want to pursue your own work and making some money to live from, then it's okay. So I'm perfectly happy doing what I'm doing right now. And I'm never bored. I'm constantly out of time, checking up on things, planning projects. It's not
for weird courses.
Yeah, like doing weird courses, like not going to bed and writing strange fiction. Starting a gazillion projects and not finishing all of them, that's another problem. So no, but it's incredibly exciting to do so. And if you can find the right strategy for that, I mean, I must say something. I would not start out in my early 20s to do what I'm doing right now. Like I can do what I'm doing right now because I'm more relaxed, I'm more settled in my survival strategies. And so I can take a little bit of a weirder trajectory. And I'm also kind of resting on the laurels of projects that were successful, that kind of worked, and that makes me more comfortable. But if I'm thinking about how, you're in your early 20s and things are difficult anyway, and I'm going to succeed in this world, it could be kind of terrifying pursuing that. Unless you're like a non-terrified person, or if you drink a lot of alcohol and gives you a lot of kind of, then you could do it as well.
No, it doesn't help.
No, I don't know.
Another question from me.
Yeah.
Zhenya, you spoke about serious games, and I really wonder why you hate this name, serious games.
Oh yeah, just for the context, before we started, we briefly mentioned serious games, as in kind of that's what Georg does, but we almost started an argument regarding the term serious games specifically. So Georg, you want to start? You're the guest. You work.
Yeah. Why do we hate serious games? No, I don't hate serious games. Excuse me.
Serious games. The term.
So serious, again, like I'm having like a more of extensive talk on that. Serious games is actually a term for those of you who don't know that was coined quite early, I think in the 1990s already, as kind of educational games. And this was always kind of split apart from mainstream gaming.
Mm-hmm.
And these were experiences that were really more for schools, for workplaces. And compared with games, and mostly, first of all, they had no budget. And secondly, their design goal was to educate people and not be fun. And
Mm-hmm.
very often they were also badly designed. So this was always like, oh my God, serious games, horrible. And then only in the early 2000s, like these projects, for example, by Mall Industria or Catherine Neal, so political projects started to pop up, like subversive game that addressed political content. In a way, also serious, but not in the way like the classical serious game function. They're supposed to provoke. They're not supposed to kind of educate you in kind of a school kind of way. And I saw myself in the tradition of Mall Industria and these other people, and not in the tradition of, I don't know, Oregon Trail,
Mm-hmm.
which is a cool game, by the way.
Also kind of a serious game.
Yeah, it's kind of a serious game. It's kind of the mother of all serious games. But Oregon Trail is actually a good example how this stuff can work. So in the 2000s, there was this series of smaller projects that were started by people like Mall Industria or Papers, Please, for example, that were a little bit closer to like the indie realm, and published in this indie context as well, and being much more about raising awareness, provocating people, pointing out particular social problems, food for thought games. I don't know. So for me, it was always a little bit weird to be in the same kind of field as the company that teaches people how to use machinery with like a very, very bad looking game. So I was like, no, I want to be in the weird indie segment. Is that possible as well? Can I please be? And then so we came up with all these types, like, oh, we are like a socio-political indie or social awareness games. So we kind of document, and now I'm actually quite happy for games like Pathot, for example, to use the term documentary games. So this is something that is more appropriate because it's a game that has a documentary element in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a good way to put it. Like the most problem with serious games term, it's because sort of like Harl Nelson was always just spilling poison every time somebody called him a science fiction writer. Sort of the same principle as in, because like serious games, like the way that I've been taught at the uni was it's educational games, it's games that are supposed to sell shit, so ad games. It's the games that are purely artistic for no like commercial purpose whatsoever. It's just, as far as I can tell, the only difference is the intent. Do we intend to sell stuff, or we have been commissioned to do that shit?
Yeah, and it's a really bad label. It's calling all films that is not kind of, I don't know, like entertainment cinema serious film. If I make video art, I make serious film, and it's the same as a commercial. I mean, for me, that is just kind of it's a bad label at the end of the day.
Yeah, technically, if you just approach not the word but the spirit, then Beginner's Guide by David Redden is a serious game because it just challenges the whole industry, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's kind of also, again, like they just don't mix and match in this particular scenario, just a motley crew of different genres. And that's the crux of an issue.
I mean, the Beginner's Guide and is actually like a perfect example for, I mean, for me, this is really like an art game in the sense of this is art, because it's the medium folding back into itself, reflecting itself.
Yeah.
And this is, which is kind of one of the definitions of art, that there's a level of self-reflection in the work itself. No, but and also like for me, like I would say a beginner's guide. This is the Beckett of video games. Not sure which piece of Beckett, but Beckett.
At least something. Yeah, and like with those artistic games specifically, like once we are getting them up, like we probably should also like either come up with a term or just relax and not use them anymore. But as with all labels, they are very handy to use. You know, like because I wouldn't call whatever you are doing like a serious game. It's like experimental. Because like Path Out also, like when I started playing it, I think it was I was a judge on Casual Connect or something. It was before the one before the reboot, where he was, I think, Kiev actually. And like it was just basically a game, normal, absolutely normal game until Abdullah popped up on the screen. At which point it's like was somewhat weird because this was literally like a recording, like in Let's Plays, basically in this corner of the window. We also immediately got attention and immediately also just changed the whole attitude.
It's curious because someone compared this element of the game in a very, I guess it's an enormous gravitas. He said like this is oral history as it has been used in some of the Holocaust's documentaries like Shoah after World War II. So this is really like a very particular way of, and I'm like, wow, okay, I never would have put our game in such a context with such a gravitas, you know, like, but apparently, you know, this is how the game became. I mean, but this is curious because we never had the intention of saying like, okay, we see ourselves in the tradition of documentary. We want to tell oral history, like the people who made this the Shoah documentaries. But we were like, yeah, we want to make a fun and approachable game with a colleague from Syria, and we want to keep it light, and we want to keep it inviting, and we want to kind of lure people into the heavier materials with that. But so there was more of a deceiving element in that, to be honest.
I can definitely relate to that, given the art style of Safe Koch being cartoonish, Darkwing Duck style, and then there's an assassin who was built like a sex robot. I've actually been meaning to ask, like, how do you actually pick the projects, apart from the money thing and funding and so on, but because you have like quite a various portfolio of stuff that you actually did and stuff that you have been thinking about. So like what lures you, what stories take your interest?
I mean, to be honest, I'm not really inspired by games so often.
Except Safe Koch and 30 Hallo, of course.
Except for Safe Koch, obviously. No, because I don't really play so many computer games anymore. I don't mind developing computer games, but I have rarely time to develop games, to play games. Because when I come home in the evening, you know, like I'd rather read books. Because I think it makes me a better narrative designer if I read than if I don't know, play Assassin's Creed. No offense meant. So this is always a bit of a hard choice. So no, but the inspiration to make these projects, I don't know, it sometimes comes from like really a whim. Or like you talk to someone and then you say like, hey, wouldn't it be nice to try X, Y, Z? And then you end up trying X, Y, Z, and then you go like, oh, this is interesting. Shall we apply for some money? And sometimes you bump into people, and then things happen like Vienna all tomorrow. So sometimes there is, and rarely, I would say there is like really like so there's this more accidental things, ideas that evolve, and sometimes there's really like the urge to tell a particular story. And I think this was the case with me being in Kiev during Euromaidan and me developing kind of a very particular relationship to that country and the conflicts that happened there led, for example, to the creation of The Fallen, this really short game, The Fallen, which is about a sniper at Donetsk airport. Every bullet this sniper shoots that hits is the story of a soldier that fought and died there, and all the biographies are real. So, and we have like, there is no, it doesn't look at ideologies, it only looks at personal stories. So, and this really came from the urge to engage with Ukraine in a way, and to engage with Ukrainians that also worked on that project. Like it sounds like that really is this artistic cliche of like, I have to make this project. Mm-hmm. You know, like I really want to make this project. There's also like follow-ups to that, the Fallen projects. But I somehow have to become very rich and very successful very soon in order to pursue that further. Because gotta be a bit realistic, you know, like there is in the current, it's really not a perfect time to get excessively experimental single player games funded in the industry.
Yeah, and about acting career, actually, I think you are the third person in our podcast who have acting background.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's kind of a tendency when the actors become game writers. I don't know why. Can you tell us something about it, and if it helps you in work, in games?
Yeah, I mean, very much so. I mean, dialogue, the understanding of characters, the understanding how characters are supposed to, language, different styles of languages, tools to develop narration, understanding what the situation is. And I think this is really crucial. What is a situation? How can you create a situation that is, you know, exciting and that, you know, doesn't just go like this? I think this was it Sam Lake who said he always looks like in the worst possible outcome that could happen. And this is basically what we were getting taught in school. Is like, okay, you have to look for the worst thing in the situation, like the worst attitude towards an antagonist, the worst thing that could potentially happen to you, like the biggest heights and kind of the darkest and deepest depths. So this is something that quite helps. I mean, and being exposed to like a ton of literature, Shakespeare, and like literature from like going back to Greeks and Shakespeare and modern, I don't know, in our case, mostly Central European and American postmodern literature. So this quite helps writing for games as well, because you're not so much defined. And this is also why I'm like, okay, I do like to, for example, play all Inkly games, for example, but I'm not like soaking up every narrative game that comes, because sometimes I think it's more important to read Shakespeare in order to be a good writer, or Milton, or I don't know what, than to kind of play all the games out there. Mm-hmm. That also would make all the, it's, I don't know, like the genre still needs a lot of fresh energy in order to grow. And there's another thing which I think is quite interesting. If you come from acting, you do understand on a visceral level what play means. And this is something that we somehow miss in games sometimes, that we have a problem with physicality also in the language, how we talk about games. And this is really like digital games, you know, like experimental urban games, for example, which is heavily informed by theater. They address it quite well, but we have a bit of a problem with what the body actually is of the gamer. We have no somatic concepts in game design as well, except for like a few critical books that kind of pointed it out. And I think coming from a very physical theater background, you know, it's sometimes that gives you a different edge in design. If you know, like, okay, I want to really put someone in a very, very particular physical state, and with what could be the tools to achieve that.
No,
Yeah,
thank you.
I would say this is the shit that we are like missing a lot. Specifically, just like putting a person into a specific emotional and physical state,
Yeah,
with a person
yeah.
even behind the computer, and like movies can do it. Like latest Joker did the shit to me. I was shaking my ass off. I
Oh.
won't say anything about the quality of the movie because I'm still processing the shit, but the effect was there, and I think it's kind of like because we in the university with like Christiana Hutter, our mutual, as we learned like 2 days ago, our mutual friend and was my first teacher in CGL. We were basically forced to do games live, like live games, analog games, basically,
Hmm.
but not using like not board games, but specifically bodies mostly with a limited amount of props. And
Hmm.
that part was just, I think that one put me on the slippery slope of doing weird shit. Like weirder, I mean weirder. But it's actually, since we have a little bit, I want to talk a bit about media literacy because you have mentioned that the players on the Vienna all tomorrow, and I'm assuming for the other projects too, they
Hmm.
are not like hardcore, not hardcore, it's a bad word, but they're not people who like breathe and live games, as in they know what every single thing
Hmm.
means.
Hmm.
They might be just a person from the street who is also 80 years old. What were the challenges presented by these different like levels of literacy? What people understood, what people did not?
I must say we didn't experience too many problems. It was a little bit surprising, but it was so basic. It was literally just here's a tablet, point it at the stage, click on something, and
Mm-hmm.
then take a decision. The big advantage that we had that people were never by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you had no idea, it was highly likely that you had someone on your team that had an idea.
Mm-hmm.
So people were never kind of left alone with the problem, but they always, and there would have been a person to help just in case,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a guide. But there was always kind of someone there to kind of take you along. And what is kind of something that people could immediately understand is I'm wearing a costume, I'm in a situation, I have to
Mm-hmm.
take decisions. And I think this was so people might have not been engaged with digital games. They certainly haven't played any mixed reality, augmented reality games, but then again, who has?
Mm-hmm.
But the setup didn't require this special knowledge. It was like here's your costume. We give you an intro. We tell you who you are and where you are. Go inside of the room, take decisions, and debate with the others, and enjoy wearing your costumes, and enjoy the room, and enjoy the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other level that kind of made that more kind of bearable for people was that we always kind of were guiding them along at one point, and it was always entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
At every moment of the show, every line tried to somehow poke people in a way, like there was sometimes even a little bit, is this now, are we kind of overdoing this? Does it have to be kind of that kind of ultra sarcastic all the time? But it was really like, it was like cranked up all the way. And some jokes were, of course, better than others.
Mm-hmm.
But it was always kind of a humorous experience. And I think that is, like, I mean, if you can understand the Viennese humor, then of course that works for you. So, and I think this made it approachable as well. It wasn't dry, and it was, my colleagues did a great job. It was fairly well written, I must say.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't work though if you spoke English and you had a translator.
Yeah.
That was never the intention. But I think people who played in a translated setting, they found it mostly interesting. But yeah, it had to be like to really enjoy it. You had to speak the mother tongue.
Yes, a problem. Plus, it's a very specific atmosphere as far as I
Yes,
tell.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, that as well. And of course, you needed to have the knowledge of the Viennese somehow in order to really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. All right, it's about 8 o'clock. Should we start wrapping up, or we have some more questions?
No, we haven't questions. So yes, I think we should say thank you.
Well, thank you. It was a terrific evening.
We suck at wrapping up.
We could produce the baby again, but the baby is actually asleep now.
Oh.
As you can see, there's a free roaming mother now in the background. She was successful. A round of applause for the mother who brought the baby to bed. Hero of the motherland.
All right, then thank you very much, Georg. Also, if you want to interact more with Georg, sign up for the Gauntlet in English.
Yes.
Georg is already there. Also, Georg it isn't his first time on the courses. He also did the game writing summer?
Winter.
Winter, yes. Summer already was narrative design, yeah. And there is also a Russian version, which we call Narrative Nevizov. By all means, do sign up. We're starting on 21st. Mash, do we have anything else?
No, yep, 21st October. 21st?
21st.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Okay. So thank you, everyone.
So do I say spasiba or bashalsta?
Spasiba is for thank you.
Okay, then I say spasiba.
Bashalsta is more like you're welcome for my presence.
So you say bashalsta.